guess our history goes back 49 years.
49 years, but we really only we know each other for about 20 of those years. We were on a HUPS trip to Cozumel, staying at Scuba Club in 2005. Had a good week of diving, and on the last day, as we were getting ready to go to the airport, we had an afternoon flight. It was on a Sunday. The women decided they wanted to go shopping, and me and Dennis were sitting around in the bedroom, on the bed, talking, playing cards or something. And something was said about Wichita Falls, and in the ensuing conversation, we discovered that we'd both gone to Midwestern University during the same time frame, but as far as we knew, we had never met because I was in the business department.
And I was in the chemistry department, and it was 1963. Midwestern at that time was part of the A&M system, and it was required for us to be in ROTC for a minimum of 2 years. And of course, that's the only place that we might have ever met would have been an ROTC class.
Probably on the parade field someday, because you were in the band, I was in a regular company, and then for extracurricular, I was on the Pershing Rifles drill team.
You were, yeah.
And then I decided to go contract for the last 2 years of it.
Like I did.
And as a result, I got a commission, and I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Infantry. And while I was at Fort Benning, I found out that my ultimate assignment was going to be to Vietnam. So I started.
That's when you decided that you were going to be a ranger.
Well, I decided it was a good insurance policy. Maybe they could teach me or show me something that might save my life, and it sure wouldn't hurt and get me in better condition.
So they sent you to jungle school.
And then I went to jungle school for 2 weeks, and then I got on a plane and flew to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And in Vietnam, I was assigned to the first cav, which they were stationed right up on the Cambodian border, so there was just us and the bad guys in the woods. Didn't have to worry about friendly villages. There were no villages.
Yeah.
And I spent my tour there out in the woods.
Fording rivers and making sure that everybody else stayed safe.
That was the one thing my Ranger tab got me, was my company commander used me as his official river crosser.
Well, you were also just a shadow of your current self back then too.
Yes, you've got a couple of pictures of there that were taken back when we were on Green Line duty on the fire base of me. And you know, you carry a 100-pound pack on your back, and you walk up and down hills all day waiting for the other guy to show up to shoot at you. You're not very hungry, and you do lose a lot of weight.
Yeah.
But I did make it back one piece. I lost one man and had 2 men wounded, so
That's
I
good.
was very fortunate.
Henry, when you got out of the service, eventually you made your way back down here to Houston, and you got into diving. When did you get certified?
I was certified in 1985, and almost all my dives have been out in the open ocean. I've only done class dives in freshwater.
And I think that you and I joined HUPS almost at the same time, right around 1998.
Somewhere in the late 90s, I joined HUPS, and while I was in HUPS, then later on I became treasurer, where I was there for like 15 years or so, and then I'm still on the board of directors.
Right. Well, I do know that we both spent off and on time in sea space.
In sea space, yes.
That was that's how I got involved with HUPS, is that I came up and saw the people at the booth and said, I think I'd like to join. And so I did. The program that you're going to be talking about today, The Best of Henry, we decided that we were going to break it down into the eastern area of the world and the western area of the world. Diving in the west area, you're going to be talking about and showing images about St. Croix, which is in the Virgin Islands, and also down in Bonaire, which is down in the Dutch West Indies. So tell me a little bit about St. Croix and what you did there. I know that you've been 3 trips, I know at least.
There was actually 4 trips. 2009, I went on the Necaton Rocaille. It was a live-aboard boat, and I dove St. Croix. That was my first introduction. And then in 2015, Russell had a trip that went to the British Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
And then y'all did a 3 or 4 day extension where you came over to St. Croix. So I planned a trip where I would be there during the same time frame.
Yeah.
And that's when I got to see the north side of diving on St. Croix, which I wasn't a real fan of. And one day we went over to the Frederick Street Pier, and I fell in love with the pier. You're going to see seahorses and you're going to see frogfish, potentially. Nothing's guaranteed.
Well, I think that we were the same way. We were diving on out there on the outskirts of St. Croix, and it was okay, but it was not great. And we got back over to the pier, and all of a sudden he says, "Wow, hey, this is really something good." And we didn't do anything but dive the pier from that point on.
Yeah.
I think it was 2015 while you were on the Necton, you also did the wrecks, the shallow wrecks.
Well, there's 2 sites down on the very end of where they go. It's the northwest corner, because Frederick Street is on the west side of St. Croix, and the water is much clearer, the visibility is better, and you never know what's going to swim in from the ocean. The pier is my favorite because I like frogfish and I like seahorses, which when you see the pictures, you'll see that.
Yeah, and we're going to have a little bit of a breakout session on both of those, because you do have some really excellent shots of the seahorses and of the frogfish. Well, when you were in St. Croix, I think that was it 2017 that you were at Cottages by the Sea?
2015 Cottages by the Sea.
But it looked like, what I was looking like, it was like a mom and pop type of operation.
It was a mom and pop who lived there in their house, and the guy apparently was a handyman, and he started building these little cottages, and each one of them is different. They are very popular. You've got people who've been coming back for 10 or 15 years. They rent the same cottage. So when you make your reservation, you've got to reserve it like 9 to 12 months in advance if you want to get in there during the summer month.
We're upstairs now, and we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the specifics of Henry's photos and his experiences with them. In St. Croix especially, the pictures that you sent me, I noticed that you had 3 different cameras that you were working with. And one of them was the Nikon D300, which is a 2007 model. And then in between that, you ended up with the Olympus TG3 and then moved on to the Olympus EM1 Mark II. So maybe tell a little bit about the differences of the cameras and which ones and why you changed.
The D300 was the last one that I had, and it was in an Aquatica housing, which I don't know what it weighed, but it felt like it weighed a ton. It was a big horse to haul around. And as I got older, I didn't want to fight that thing underwater. So that's when I started using the GoPro, and I had a TG3 that I carried to take topside photos. And I got the housing for it, and on this trip I used it to take some of the pictures. On the next trip that I went to on St. Croix, I used that TG3, and in 2017, which was my last trip to St. Croix, by that time I had the Olympus, and it's a 3/4, so it's a smaller camera. The Nauticam housing is much smaller and lighter and easier to handle.
Yeah. Well, I've been a real fan of the little TG series of Olympus cameras because most of the people that I've seen their work, the color is great. It looks like it's sharp enough, and from what I talked to them, it's very convenient. It was interesting though, is when I started to actually look at the pictures.
The resolution.
And to compare the two, I looked at the initial ones of, like for instance, this is a wide angle picture with the D300. And if I come in and I zoom in on it and I look at it, that's really, really sharp.
Yeah.
And the color is great as well. And then when I go back in and I pull up one that was done with the TG3, the colors look great and it looks sharp, but then when you zoom in on it, you see that it really isn't as sharp. The lens is not the same high quality as you get.
It's not as high quality, and they've got an algorithm that's designed to get the color.
Now, if you look at the pictures that you get with the Olympus EM1 Mark III, the Mark II, excuse me, yeah, the EM Mark II, the colors are still great. And then when you zoom in on this and look at the detail is there. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it is as good or better than the Nikon D300. They're very comparable in my opinion. I think as much as anything else, the lens quality is what determines the overall resolution.
The lens quality, and probably advances in the raw software, the way it's able to render it.
Let's move on to Bonaire a little bit, because I know that you have 2 featured resorts that you went to, and that was Captain Don's Habitat, which we all seem to know about, and Divi Flamingo Beach Resort.
I prefer Captain's Don because, one, they don't get upset if you go for a single dive. Divi didn't stop me, but I tried to do it when nobody was looking. And at Captain Don's, go out to the wall on the rope, you go left or right, and you've got a nice coral, lively area. At Divi, cruise ships come right across their front, and when the cruise ships come across, they make everybody get out of the water, and it's killed all the soft corals. So they have nothing but hard corals down there. There's a few soft corals down in some crevice, but far and few in between.
Now, while you were, how many trips have you been to Bonaire, do you think? 4 or 5?
Oh, probably more like 15 to 20.
Wow, that's a lot of diving.
My first open ocean trip was to Bonaire with a group of people from Exxon.
I guess one of the features of diving in Bonaire is that there's all the beach diving that you can do. You rented trucks, I would imagine.
Captain Don's, Buddy Dive, they all have the pickup option. In my younger years, yes, that was an option. As you get older,
Yeah.
you don't like climbing over rocks, and beach entries is like, that's too much work.
While you were, I guess earlier, while you were still young, I suppose, you probably did a tour of the island and saw all the sights as well.
But yeah, I've been the slave huts, down on the wild side of the island where you got the waves kicking up spray 20, 30 feet. Yes, I mean, you drive up and down there to kill. Used to be where the nudist colony was too, on that side of the island.
Well, down on the south end, you also have the salt works, the salt flats where they're harvesting salt, and the salt pier.
And the salt pier. And the salt pier is probably my favorite dive to do on Bonaire. But if you come in by boat, they drop you right there. They can't tie up to the pier, but they can get you in with about 15, 20 yards away. It's an island that has not gone totally commercial because of cruise lines. And you've got the windsurfers on one side, you got the divers on their area, and it's a very laid back island. It's changed a lot in the last 20 years.
Yeah. One of the things that I found interesting is that when I was looking at your photos that you sent to me, that you had photos not only at St. Croix, but also at Bon Air of coral restoration work that was being done.
They're taking areas that the coral has died from blight, so they're taking coral that's been broken into little pieces and they're hanging it off of these trees and regrowing it and then replanting it.
Mm-hmm.
And St. Croix's got one site there, and then on Bon Air, Divvy has set their own up, which is over on Klein Bon Air. They've got like 5 or 6 trees over there, and their dive masters take turns going over there and cleaning them, or there's some maintenance they do on them. And then Buddy Dive, right there, right next to Captain Don's, they've got some coral trees out there where they're doing the same thing.
I think it's time now that we move on over to the eastern part of the world. You have been over there a number of times. You've been to the Anilao area, and you've been in the Philippines. You've also been to northern Sulawesi, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, about the Philippines.
Well, in the Philippines, I've done 2 trips, 2019, 2022. Both times when I went over there, I did a warm-up session at El Galleon, which is on a little island about 5 miles from the Anilao area. And then in 2019, I moved from El Galleon over to Crystal Blue Resort, and Backscatter was putting on a micro course that Mike Bartak taught. And so that I spent 10 days there. And then this year, I did 7 days at El Galleon and 7 days at a place called Einar, which was a trip sponsored by Reef Photo. We had classes, but not near to the extent that you do at Crystal Blue with Mike Bartak teaching.
What about the differences in the diving between Anilao and the El Galleon area?
El Galleon area is more wide angle. There's some macro stuff in there. I mean, it's sort of a combination. They have some muck sites, but they don't take you there unless you have an overriding majority that request it. Now they do 4 dives a day. The 4th dive, they normally make it a muck dive. It's more of a late evening twilight dive, as I would call it.
one of your favorite subject appears to be seahorses. And you've taken seahorses from Bon Air, like you have this beautiful orange one.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have a red one. And then you got some in Antelope, and you also have some when you were in Lembe as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, seahorses can be very frustrating to get photos of, because if you're the first person to find them, they'll be sitting upright. If by the time you take 2 or 3 pictures, they're turning away from you, they're laying over, and then you've got to try to coax them up. And to be environmentally friendly, we don't want to be touching them, so you try to come in with a finger or your hand, and you just put it underneath them, and as you start getting close to them, they will raise up.
mm-hmm.
And then you've got to get back and get them in focus before they lay back down.
Well, obviously you did. You go back into the other areas that you have, the Philippines, Antelope, and you take a look at those pictures, and you'll see, like this one, you have a beautiful spiny.
Uh-huh.
And look at the nice dark background. I'm not sure how you managed to do that, because you must be controlling your strobes so that you're just illuminating the subject.
Luck has a lot to do
Luck.
with it. But see, in the Pacific, most of your seahorses are down on the reef. They're not got their tail wrapped around something. You find them out, the guides call it the critter zone. Mm-hmm. And it's, I don't know where they're going, but they'll just be swimming along. And you know, you go in, and if you're lucky enough to find one of them, then you're going to get a photo or 2 before they start laying down on you.
Well, now here's one.
That is the pygmy seahorse. Yeah. And you're doing good to even see them. They're so small when you're looking through the viewfinder. That one was taken in the Philippines, and the guide was on the other side with his light pointing at it to, you know, he put it down to a fine point to help pinpoint where it's at, and you're down there, you know, in and out and trying to get it in focus, and you just have to get lucky.
Well, you did. And finally you have another spiny seahorse here.
Another spiny really seahorse that was behind a little piece of rotted wood or something there.
You have another favorite subject, which would be frogfish. I think we'll include a rhinopius in here in the discussion as well, because it kind of looks like a frogfish. Okay. But let's go over and talk about the St. Croix. Here's one you have of a red, beautiful one. I think most of these were on the pier.
Those were all on the pier. I mean, those sponges you see in the background are on one of the columns holding up the pier.
Yeah. And then you have the yellow one as well.
And it's, again, being held up. It's on one of the columns there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they don't move around very much. If you agitate them too much, sometimes they'll jump out and swim at you, but normally, you know, there was one of the yellow ones, found him like 5 days in a row in the same area.
Sometimes you see a male and a female.
The little red one you first showed there, that one is a male, and there was a yellow female right out in front of it. And the males they want to stay behind the females because the females have been known to eat the males, because the females are about 2 to 3 times the size of the male.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Bonaire. Okay, Bonaire. Only got one here, which is really a nice one, but I notice here he's got his lure out.
I got really lucky. I mean, to have their little lure out, and you got negative space behind it so it stands out, because usually when you first see these, it's just a blob buried back in a little nook or a cranny.
A lot of times you see them on sponges that are the same color, so they just blend in. And finding that negative space is that's a skill.
It's a skill, or a lot of it has to do with luck. There's another photo that you've got in there of an arrow crab that's got negative space. I got positive feedback from that many years ago, so I started looking for negative space.
That was probably one of the first times when I was aware of just how good a photographer you could be. We were doing that for the Moody Gardens
show.
And we probably went through 200 or 300 different photos, and that one popped up on the screen, and everybody was saying, "Oh wow, look at that!" But no, the negative space there, and the framing and the focus, technically it was as good as it was artistically. So let's get on into some of these over in the other part of the world. Here we have the photos that you had from the Philippines. Now this is a very interesting one as well. I mean, for a number of reasons.
Well, I like the little green piece of coral that arched over him, and for some reason he was opening and closing his mouth there. I don't know whether they're breathing, trying to burp something out or what, but everything worked. I mean, and that little sucker was only maybe that big.
Yeah,
very small,
very tiny.
Very small.
And then you have another one here, a white one covered with crap.
Well, that's the muck.
Yeah.
Black volcanic sand.
But you can obviously see he's got a lure. It's a very prominent lure, big lure.
Yeah, they have a different shape on their lure there than what you see in the Caribbean. I mean, it's bigger, more dynamic, and he had actually been waving it, and then he was in the process of bringing it back when I took the picture.
Yeah, and of course, the rhino.
The rhinopus. That one was down at about 70 feet. Normally they're down around 100, and the dive guides was actually being backlit by a big video light, and then with the flash it made it all sort of pop.
Now this one, of course, is one of my real favorites.
It's a hairy frogfish, and it was doing whatever it is they're doing when they open and close that mouth. I don't know what they're doing, but the guides will tell you if you sit there and watch them long enough, they will do that. They will do it.
And they're small.
These are a lot bigger than what you find over in the Philippines.
Okay.
I mean, they were getting up, almost the size of your hand, some of them.
Okay. And then you have little painted.
Yeah, the little painted one. There's a story that's too long to go back into that, but it put me into a deco stop.
Oh, okay. Was he that deep?
That was at 99 feet, and when we found him, I had 4 minutes of bottom time left, and I looked down and it was showing the 0 bottom time and a 10-foot ceiling with a 7-minute stop.
Okay, well that's why we have computers.
That's why we have computers. I showed it to my dive guide, and he was wondering why I was starting to go up, and I just went like this, and we went up to about 40 feet, and it stopped flashing at me, and then it started counting down, doing my 7-minute stop.
Yeah. In northern Sulawesi, you've been to several resorts over there on a couple of different trips.
Correct. I've been there twice, 2019, 2022. In 2019, I went down on a reef photo trip, 10 days at NAD. I went in 4 days early, so I got 14 days in there. And then 2022, it was on an Isle of Dreams trip. We did 5 days at Saladin Resort, and then we moved over to Limbe Resort for 4 days. And then I took an additional 7 days that I booked separately and went back down to NAD Limbe to do that, to finish that off.
Now there are differences in the diving between the Banakan area as well as the Limbe area.
The Banakan area is more wide angle with some macro. I mean, you can go out with a macro lens and you can find things to take photos, but you're going to see an awful lot of stuff that you're wishing you had a wider lens on. And if you are a big turtle fan, there's one area over there where you're going to see all kinds of turtles. They come in there in this wall and they nest in these little cracks to take their nap or sleep, whatever they're doing. But they totally ignore you. If you get between them and their nesting area, they'll basically push you out of the way.
The ride over from Saladin to Limbe.
Yeah, it's done by the Limbe Resort, sends their boat over. Your dive equipment's loaded on the boat. You take your camera equipment out there. You get on the boat. You're their boat, so you've got to redraw your weights for diving. We did 2 dives en route. We did one which was a true muck dive right up against northern Sulawesi. They've got these mangrove swamps, so you get a lot of muck that comes out of the mangroves. And then we went down to the Banca area and we did a second dive down there, which was a lot clearer, wide angle was really good. Reefs were in a lot better condition down there. And then we spent 4 days over at Limbe Resort. And we dove with them, and then I moved down to NAD.
Now, I think that you have mentioned before that there was a difference in the diving standpoint, especially in the Limbe area, as far as the quality of the diving itself.
Limbe diving, most of it is muck. You can do some wide angle, but the majority of people go there for muck diving, and you're going to find a lot of critters. So I pretty well put my macro lens on, and that's the only thing I worry about.
Over in the Limbe area with the NAD and the Limbe Resort, what can you tell me about the differences and the preferences that you have as far as the diving and the photography between resorts?
From the diving and photography, I prefer NAD for one reason. They do one guide for every 2 divers, where at the other resorts, it's one guide for 4 divers. And so you only have to fight one person to get in to take the pictures instead of having to fight 3 people.
From a standpoint of the resort itself, when I was looking at the photos of them, they all look like they're superior resorts. Do you have a preference?
Saladin and Limbe Resort are grade A. NAD is a few steps below it. Their facilities are not, NAD's facilities are not as good as what you're going to find at Limbe Resort. But the 2-to-1 ratio is what gets my attention.
Yeah. There's one other subject matter that is one that is really my favorite, and that would be these little yellow gobies. I've seen them around. You always seem to see them in things, and you can see from this one, he's in a bottle.
He's in a bottle. The reason I started looking for him was Mike Bartak has this one picture of, it's called a bearded yellow goatee, and it's got hair all over the front of the body. And so I wanted to go duplicate that picture, so I started looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you find a beer bottle down there, and almost majority of the time you're going to find a yellow goby that's living either in it or right on it.
Yeah, and then you can get in closer like you did on that one.
And my normal technique is I take one from a distance, and then I start going and taking them and keep moving in and see how close I can get before they run and hide.
The other thing is that when you see one,
There may be 2 or 3 in there.
yeah, apparently they are mated for life or until one of them dies and they go find something else. But I mean, these are all excellent photos. And these were the ones that were done in Analau. But you also have others that were done in
Limbe.
Limbe.
And the
Here's
Limbe,
another 2 right here.
that was, I think it was a piece of bone off of something that was down there and trash on the bottom that you find them, but they were living in that little cranny there.
Yeah, and again, you have the pair.
It looks like you've got eggs right below them there.
Yeah, I think that maybe there are some eggs because I've seen them protecting eggs on a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one.
And that one's obviously pregnant.
Yeah.
She's full of eggs.
Now they're just very photogenic and interesting to watch.
Well, you got the blue eye, which contrasts with her yellow body. And then if you can get it in focus and get in close, you get some good pet photos.
Well, like a lot of your photos, I look at these and I say, I wish I had taken that photo.
No, that's a compliment.
Well, the compliment is deserved.